Welcome to Right Talk with Mike Lee. This evening show, I'm going to talk about human trafficking, hopefully inform and educate you. It'll be an education for me for sure. And I'm sure that my education will be enhanced and made better by the presence of my I think we're good friends. I guess we're good friends.
I'm here.
For a while, we were road dogs when,
Yeah.
when you were running for sheriff.
That's right.
We were doing all kind of clandestine things. And
Here, there, and everywhere.
But his name is Joe Martinez, and he's a private investigator and all around
Good guy.
good guy.
There you go.
Okay. Welcome to the show, Joe.
Thank you.
It's
Thank you
good
for
to see
the
you. I
invitation.
hadn't seen you in a couple of months, man.
At least. And then I get the call and say, or got the email and say, hey, we're going to have the show. I'll say, I'll be there.
I got a now, Joe. Now, this show on human trafficking is something I've been wanting to do since December.
Okay.
Because I wasn't aware that it was even in existence or a problem here in Austin or nationwide. But thankfully, it's one of the things that apparently that the president is actually beginning to address in a kind of an oblique kind of way. It's kind of through the immigration thing a little
Right.
bit. And they're trying to do something about it. And it's a worldwide problem, actually. But I know that Joe's a private investigator, and he's a very experienced guy. You tell us about your background, Joe.
Well, a little bit about my background. I was born here in Austin, Texas, back in 1945, and became a police officer in 1968. In the state of Michigan, I've been a police officer in 2 states. Came back to Austin back in 1975, and became a deputy sheriff here in Travis County. I had the solo district of everything east of 35 all the way to the Bastrop County line, and everything south of the river past Creedmoor. There's one man, that was me. After about 14 months on the street, I was promoted to detective. Of course, you know, you got a little bit of everything going on in that detective mode. You got everything from index crimes, burglary, homicides, assault, sexual assaults. Back in the day, it was rape. And then from there, I left and went to the State Attorney General's office as a fraud investigator. Investigated Medicaid fraud all over the state of Texas. Everything from Brownsville, Texas, all the way to the Panhandle, east from El Paso, all the way to Beaumont, and in between. So I was traveling quite a bit.
That's like the whole bottom half of the state.
That's exactly right. And, you know, you go to these poor communities, and a lot of the investigation that we did was a lot of it involved these nursing homes. The condition of some of these nursing homes, and matter of fact, one of the premier cases that I had was up in Fort Worth. Spent about 2 years working the fraud investigation on a pharmacist, and it took me 2 years to investigate the case, and the guy got 10 years in prison, but he was out in 2 years.
So you broke even.
He got a better deal than I did. So I left there and went to work for the Travis County DA's office here in Austin. And from there, once I went inside the DA's office, well, I'm going to be here until I retire, and which I did. Did about 18 years there, along with the time that I went with the sheriff's office. I had about 21 years of service in that field. But inside the DA's office, I handled everything from trial division, juvenile, street gangs, white-collar crime, just about everything that you could think of, because I wanted to know how it works. You know, as a street cop, you don't get exposed to much of that stuff. Human trafficking, drugs, narcotics, undercover work, actually going in there and putting together a search warrant, putting together an arrest warrant, putting together an affidavit. All of these things that have to deal with the law. And you got to do it right. You got to do it by the book. And then, of course, after about 18 years there, I retired and went to work as a private investigator. CM Investigations has been around for over 20 years. And that was started by my late wife, Cindy Martinez, and picked up the business, and here I'm still doing it today.
Yeah, your head fake to retirement?
What's that?
I call it head fake to retirement. You said you retired, but it's kind of a contradiction in terms of say you retired and be a candidate for sheriff at the same time.
Boy, you know,
'cause that was a time-consuming venture. I know.
That's what takes a year out of your life, and the fact of the matter is, it's based on the experience that you want to leave behind a legacy. You want to leave behind where people can respect the office and respect the person in that office and all of the officers that are out there. There's about 1,100 employees that work for the sheriff's office in all divisions, whether it be corrections, whether it be patrol, investigators, staff, whatever. It's a big business. It acquires about 1/3 of the county budget, 1/3 to 1/2 of the county budget. So
The sheriff's department?
Yeah,
Sheriff's department?
yeah.
That's a jail and everything, right?
Jail and everything, yeah. So once you try it twice, you figure, well, you've done your best, and you go with what the people wanted, and they got what they wanted. So I'm happy with what I'm doing now.
They think they got what they want. If they cut that money off, it could be a different story.
I think the governor had a different idea.
Yeah.
And he and I were on the same track, so I can understand that. Because when you have a violent offender, whether it be drug traffic, sexual assaults, trafficking, you've got to get rid of people that don't belong in this country. You've got to move them. You've got to send them back home. And what's happening now, and of course in the national news you hear every day about the wall, and you can understand why you need a wall. You need a wall to be able to find out who's coming into your country, who's here, who's bringing all of the. Look at the people that are coming up from Honduras on the news today. There's trainloads of people coming to the border to come across. To be able to live in this country, you've got to have some kind of future. And this is America. People say, well, we're all immigrants. That's correct. But I was born here. Now, if I was to go to Mexico like they do, go to the other side, they'd arrest you and throw you back. Anywhere in the United, and I've traveled extensively. I've gone to Europe, and you have to have a passport to get in there. You have to have. How long are you going to be here? Do you have money? We're not going to feed you. You traveled all of Mexico, and same thing. When you board the plane, you fill out an application to go into their country. They know where you're going to stay. They know how long you're going to stay, and who you are, and where you live. So, if you overstay your visa there, they're going to be looking for you. You ain't from here. You're going to go back home. So let's examine the trafficking, the thing you're talking about.
Yeah.
It's very simple. There's an open border between El Paso, Texas, and Brownsville, Texas. People walk across, they swim across, they fly across, and they come into this country. I can understand people wanting to get here. All right, for a better life. Okay, but do it legally. We need to know who's here. When you drag a bunch of people through the illegal channel, they come here. You pay somebody to get you across the border. You pay somebody to get you all the way to San Antonio. Let's look at the trailer truck that was stalled in San Antonio last year, where all these people were stuck inside of a trailer and they all suffocated and died.
Right.
It didn't have to happen that way. It did not have to happen that way. When you get young children coming here, people are held in homes, different locations, and they hold them there until somebody pays the ransom. It's just like a bunch of slaves coming from Central America, Mexico, Honduras, Guatemala. It doesn't matter. Chile. I talked to a customs agent about 2 weeks ago, and we were talking about immigration. And he was telling me, he says, Mexicans aren't the only ones that are crossing the border. There were 5 people from China that were here. What makes you think that the Iranians aren't crossing? What makes you think people from Sudan aren't crossing? What makes you think people from Cuba aren't crossing? It's very simple to go to Mexico, get to the border, and walk across. And you get smuggled across. And that's what happens. When you have a bunch of these young people coming in, they have nowhere to go. If you'll recall, about 2 years ago, under the Obama administration, we had a bunch of kids come to the border and walk across. The Border Patrol became more of a nursery than a job in protecting the border, because they were taking care of kids. They had no family, young teenagers. In that group, you've also got to remember that you've got these MS-13 gang members coming across. And they're here to do what? Murder, rape, and robbery. You deal with a gang member in the most severe way. You send him back home, but he keeps coming back. What do you do with him? I would say that after about the second or third time you're here in this country illegally, then you go to the federal penitentiary for 10 years.
Keep 'em for a while. But Joe, I want to introduce the audience and me to the idea of human trafficking. There's a couple of videos I want to. This first video I hope is kind of a general type of thing.
Right.
Just to impart some basic knowledge about it, because I didn't have any.
Well, let's go back to. Matter of fact, I've seen some of the videos. Where does it all begin? It begins in the home. You have a broken home. You have a mother and a father. Had a child together. They've now separated. They've got nowhere to live. It becomes a depressing state where this young person, male or female, they don't have a future. They can't see beyond tomorrow. They can't see beyond this afternoon. Mom's not here. They live by themselves.
So they're trying to just survive.
They survive. So somebody befriends these folks. I don't know if you remember the term chicken hawk. Back in the day, when these men would wait by at the bus stop, at the bus terminals like Greyhound, and see these young men or young women coming off the bus, and they look, kind of scared because they weren't familiar with what was going on. They'd approach these youngsters. Do you have a place to stay? Well, no. Here, come with me. They would turn these people out into prostitution because now you owe me. And this is what happens. You've got to have a structure where you've got parents. Somebody's going to guide you. Somebody's going to help you. Somebody's going to feed you, clothe you. Let's start at about the age of 10 and 12. In today's world, it's no big deal. We have the internet out here. I've worked cases where some of these youngsters get on the internet and you find just about anything you want.
In your experience in working in law enforcement, did you ever come into contact with this human trafficking thing?
It's a very secretive. It's a very secretive thing. What happens is we're not going to talk about it in public, but everybody that's from the same region or country, we know. We can talk.
Does it go on here in Austin?
Yes, it is.
In Travis County?
Well,
has it been going on for a long time? To your knowledge and experience?
As long as men and women have been around, it's been going on. Okay? What happens here in Travis County is that out in the county area, unrestricted, you have a bar. Or you have a place where people go out and have drinks. And in these places, women will come in, either young women, older women, and serve liquor or alcohol to these people. Now, I've worked some cases now where we've seen some of these cases where young women are being herded by an older woman into these bars. Quote, they're just going out for a good time. Of course, you've got men that are lonely, men that'll pay for sex, and there's alcohol, drugs, and that's what happens. It's very simple. We don't talk about it in public. We don't talk about it. We don't advertise it anywhere. But if you want to know where you need to go, just ask. Somebody will tell you. You go to these flea markets. This is where people congregate. In the country, especially in Mexico, and I've been there, people have a central next to the church. There's a central area like a park. Sundays after church, everybody hangs out at the park. This is where everybody communicates with everybody about what happened at the ranch.
What happened Saturday night.
People talk about where you can find whatever you're looking for. Mexico City is what, 20 million people in Mexico City. Prostitution, drugs, whatever you want. And I've been to Mexico City and I've seen some of these things. But what I'm trying to tell you is now that here in Texas, in Austin, you go out to these little lonely places out in the county. They don't cause any problems. If there's a problem, somebody will take care of it right there. They'll never call the police. And people say, well, they live in the shadows because they're afraid to call the police. No, they're not. What happens is that once the police arrive, then the whole scam is over with.
So it behooves them, to their benefit, not to call the police.
They'd rather not.
That brings unwanted attention.
Let's look at the last week's arrest of 48 people here in Travis County. For what? For drugs. They had meth, cocaine, they had heroin, and $400,000 in cash. In what? in a little automotive repair shop on North Lamar, south of Breaker. Who would have thunk it? Now, do you think for 1 minute that was the only thing they were dealing in? Of course not.
Now, and I have been told, I don't know how true it is, that as far as human trafficking goes among young girls, that Barton Creek is kind of a hot spot.
Barton Creek is a drop-off and a pickup.
A drop-off and a pickup?
Yes. Yes.
Why haven't they said anything about this on the news or something?
Well, who's going to look? Who's going to complain? You know, we've got 15, 16, 17-year-old girls. They don't speak English, or they don't speak the native language here. How are they going to communicate with anybody? And somebody's always there watching them. Let's use the scenario of the pimp. Somebody's watching these girls. If you go to the house, or they'll take you to the house, there's somebody watching you. People become assets. They become a money. It's all about the money. If I have 4 people here that haven't paid me $15,000 apiece for bringing them to this country, they're not going anywhere. And they're females. They're either going to go into house cleaning, become some kind of maid service, or they're going to go into prostitution, into the nightclubs.
So it's work, or it's trafficking for work purposes or trafficking for sex purposes?
Well, you owe me money. I don't care how you get it. It's irrelevant to me how you get it. But you owe me $15,000. And if you have family here, they need to pay me.
Let's try to look at this first clip, then I want to talk to you about it, okay? If we can get that first clip up.
This is a topic that is a little more than a bit dark, but it desperately needs every ounce of attention possible. Human trafficking is essentially people taking control of other people. It's modern-day slavery. To break it down a little, there are 2 main subcategories of human trafficking: sex trafficking and labor trafficking. Labor trafficking deals with victims being forced to work. They may be subject to long hours, bad working conditions, little to no pay, as well as abuse or neglect from the people that control them. Some popular forms of labor trafficking are domestic servitude or farm and factory workers. Sex trafficking deals with victims who are forced to have commercial sex, which is any sexual act where anything of value is given to or received by any person. Anyone under the age of 18 that is participating in a commercial sex act is a victim of human trafficking. This means there are no minor prostitutes. If you are a minor prostitute, the law says that you did not make that decision yourself, and you cannot be held as a criminal. However, people participating in commercial sex that are over the age of 18 must prove that they are victims. Human trafficking has become its own industry, where victim services are viewed and sold as goods. Just like other industries such as food and clothing, human trafficking is driven by supply and demand. However, with companies like McDonald's and Chick-fil-A, once you sell all of your food, it's gone. Humans, on the other hand, can be sold over and over and can be exploited their entire lives.
Joe, to your knowledge, are there any organizations in Travis County or in Austin that would even care about this issue?
Well, the district attorney,
The DA?
should be the one that's leading the assault on human trafficking, because they're the ones that are going to prosecute whomever they catch. But you see, on a wider scale, when you've got young people, they're controlled by an adult. They're controlled by other adults or groups. They're handled by these groups, and you're not about to call the police. It's here again. It's a mind control thing, because it's fear. Because not only am I coming after you, if you call the cops on me, but I'm going to have my friends in Mexico or wherever you come from take care of your family. Because it's always a threat of more violence, violence on top of violence.
Okay, let's well, in your professional opinion, because you've been in law enforcement for umpteen years, what would be a remedy for it? What can be done about this?
Well, be able to put people in the community, be able to speak the language to these folks, befriend some of these people, because what happens is if nobody reaches out to them, they're not going to reach out to you. They're always going to remain in the background.
Well, they're isolated.
They're very isolated, sure, and just like the video said, you know, the low pay. You don't have enough food. You don't have housing. You may have 10 or 15 people living in a 2-bedroom house. So you've got a bad environment to begin with. So who are you going to complain to? Your friends? They're all there. That's who you talk to. You see, you go into these restaurants. Every time I've been into a restaurant, there's always somebody new and somebody different. I don't know if they're working their way up, or they get promoted, or they go to another restaurant, but you'll never see them again. And I'm not saying that the restaurants are doing it, but yeah,
It's a spot.
it's a possibility. But once you go in, 2 weeks later, there's somebody else. Somebody's got to know what's going on. It's low wages that are going to keep them there, especially if you owe me money. If whoever's handling you, whoever brought you here, has got control of you, you owe me money. And it's all about the money. It's not about the servitude. It's not about being nice. It's not about, you know, I really like these people and I think they're going to stay with me forever.
It's about getting what you can while you can.
Now, you want it now, you want it now, you want it now. So the community, I've seen some cases where they'll come into this country, 4, 5, 6 guys come together, and they'll be put up in a garage. 6 guys in a 1-bedroom garage. Living standards are not that good, because wherever they come from, better than nothing. It's got air conditioning. It's got running water. But sometimes that running water doesn't work. The toilet doesn't work. The air conditioner doesn't work. It's terrible living conditions. So here again, community involvement. It's got to be the community taking care of the people that come. If they're going to come here, find out what's going on. Talk to these folks.
So
get an outreach program for these folks.
In your experience, so ordinarily that's not something that the law enforcement officers would look for.
No, that's true. They would.
Would they have to happen up on it? It had to be a happenstance accident almost.
Well, okay. So let's use it for instance in Highland Mall or Barton Creek Mall. There's about 4 or 5 young women standing around waiting for somebody to pick them up, and the officer's sitting in the parking lot in an unmarked unit watching what's going on. And then he sees 2 or 3 guys pick up these young girls. First of all, he's going to make a traffic stop. Find out where they're going. You know, common sense. What are they doing here? What are they waiting on? They're all dressed, ready to go to a party. Party girls. So that would be the officer's ability to be able to recognize that.
I don't know that he would have probable cause just because some kids were dressed up.
Traffic stop is a traffic stop.
Yeah.
You'll find something. You'll find something. Suspicion. Go ask them a question. It's not that you're going to stop anybody, but you're out there talking to these people. If there's a law enforcement officer talking to the young girls, they're going to go away. Somebody's going to go away. And whoever brought them there is going to be angry. Because what? They didn't produce. They didn't bring back the cash. And this is what it's all about, the money. It's a power over somebody else. And a group of people having power over young adults. And move them from one location to another. And they may move from Austin to Houston to San Antonio to Dallas and to Chicago. Someday they'll be released. Not this day.
I see. Let me check out this the next video if I could, please. That's interesting to me from this standpoint, Joe. One time when I was practicing the Virgin Islands, I was in the federal courthouse one morning, and the guy came out of the U.S. Attorney's office, and he was shaking his head. His name was Mike. He said, Mike, what's going on? He said, Mike, we're on the wrong side. And he showed, I saw a memo that said, I saw a memo, but I didn't see it. But it was revealed to me that there was more money made trafficking drugs than trading oil.
True.
And that blew me away.
True. Let's
Now-
think about
now- now
let's
thi-
think about that, Mike. You've got a barrel of 50-gallon drums, and you've got one person, or you got a key. Which one's easier to hide? You've got to process the oil. You don't have to process the key.
Right. Now, that clip just said that sex trafficking was like the third largest criminal industry. I mean, there's drugs, there's sex, and there's something else.
Drug, sex, and money. Money laundering.
And money laundering.
Yeah. The root is what? The
Money.
It's all about the money. It's not about the physical attraction you have for somebody. It's about how much money am I going to make today. Here again, it goes back to the family unit. I don't know if you've ever been to Mexico. Have you ever been to Mexico?
No.
Okay. Back in the day, we used to go down to Mexico to bird hunt. And of course, you didn't hunt at night, so we'd go into town and sit at some of these local bars. And you would see the young people going around table to table trying to attract some of the older men for their money. I don't know if it's a form of life over there, but then whatever culture you come from, you're going to bring into wherever you go. That's the only life you know. If somebody says to you, Mike, I'm going to train you to be a baker, and you're in Sudan. You come from Sudan to New Jersey. So what kind of work are you going to be looking for?
I'm going to be looking for work as a baker.
As a baker, correct. So, but if you have a young girl who's been into prostitution, wherever she came from, what's she going to be looking for here?
The same thing. The same thing.
Exactly. Because it's all about what you've learned as a young child. As an American, you learn different things. You get different opportunities in this country. We don't have to go out and work in different industries. We get trained to do a specific job. As a police officer, as an attorney, as a teacher, as a doctor, or whatever you want to be. But here again, going back to your trafficking question, is how do you change that mentality? You get a young person that's 15, 16 years old, that's been doing this for 3, 4 years. How do you change that?
That's a tough nut to crack.
Well, how do you change it? Oh, you're going to change it by, oh, well, tomorrow you're not going to do that anymore? Right? It doesn't work that way.
It's not like that.
No, it doesn't work that way, does it? Once she leaves wherever you've got, wherever she's in a safe place, she goes back to what? To what she knows how to do.
What her experience is.
That's it. And that's what she does. Whether it's here, in Chicago, in California, it doesn't matter. Because you'll find your way to what you're looking for.
I think this next clip will give us an example of what it is you described.
Okay.
It is a shocking underworld, one that we usually associate with faraway places like Thailand or Cambodia. But a recent FBI sting reminds us of the horrifying reality that is human trafficking here in the U.S., that it is a real and widespread problem here. The FBI says a raid in more than 70 cities led to the arrests of 150 pimps and the rescue of more than 100 sexually exploited teenagers, some of them as young as 13 years old. Joining me now live is Ronald Hoskow, Assistant Director of the FBI's Criminal Investigative Division. Agent Hoskow, how was your agency able to track these people down?
We do this through a collaboration with state, local law enforcement and other federal law enforcement agencies, through our collaborative efforts with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children.
But how do you find them? Are they online? Are they on street
Frequently
corners?
they're online. Frequently they're in social media sites. They're on street corners. They're in the casinos or outside of the casinos. They're in areas that we refer to as tracks. And so we collaborate with our law enforcement partners and identify some of these targeted areas. We focus on them and we move closer.
And when most of us think about the Super Bowl or the Final Four, we see it in a sports context. But you say there is a correlation between these high-profile sports events and a spike in sexual exploitation.
That's right. There is money flowing in and around those events, and we use those events to focus our energy and focus our intelligence and move closer and try to identify some of these young victims.
I want to bring in Asia Graves. She's a survivor of human trafficking and now works as an advocate for victims. Asia, thanks so much for being here. Do you think these arrests will do anything to slow down the problem of sexual exploitation and human trafficking in this country?
Actually, no. I don't think it's making a dent. But you have to go after the Johns who are buying the sex, because the demand side, like you mentioned the Super Bowl, more girls are going to be sold at the Super Bowl than probably tickets, which is amazing because you think about each girl that's sold.
Yeah, that's horrifying. And the FBI used the website Backpage to target many of these suspects. How big a role do you think that website plays in these sex crimes?
Well, it's a $27 million industry that Backpage is making per year. I was sold on Backpage myself as a minor, so I understand that Backpage, you can pay $5 per ad, and if you think about how much they're making just from the adult section alone, $27 million, that's a lot of money.
It's horrifying.
Just for the adult section alone.
I want to bring you back because she raises an interesting point, which is, where are the Johns in all this? It's the demand, really. That's what's feeding this. Is there enough attention given by law enforcement to the people who their vile and disgusting needs are the ones being fed here?
There's a continuum of activity here. There is adult prostitution going on, as well as that involving juveniles or young victims. And so the FBI's traditional role hasn't been in adult prostitution. However, we see folks commonly where they appear to be adults and they turn out to be a juvenile, or we see adults that were prostituted as a juvenile. So we're trying to work closely with local law enforcement and have the greatest impact that we can.
Lastly, Asia, do you think that this problem is getting worse with the advent of places like Backpage and the internet, or do you think it's making it easier for these pimps to be caught?
It's a double-edged sword, because on one hand, we're able to use Backpage, like Fair Girls are. We use Backpage to look up girls and find girls that we can use to rescue, as well as it's an industry that's going to keep making money because men are able to sit in front of their computers, and women are able to sit in front of their computer and buy sex.
All right.
And I mean, there's one thing that you wanted to mention, that there are services for all the youth that are found. Like Fair Girls, you provide comprehensive case management for the girls that are found.
You know, Joe, when I look at this issue, it pains me in a way that my conservative brethren and the so-called liberals can't seem to come. They should at least be able to come together on this. Conservatives are supposed to be about law and order. Liberals are supposed to care so much about human rights and human suffering. And it seems to me, at least on this one issue, that they ought to be able to come together and do something. It seems like, and I was thinking at the same time, that perhaps immigration legislation could have a positive impact in this area. Is that possible? You see that?
Let's break it down a little bit, Mike. If you have a situation like a sex trafficking case, and you know what's going on in the neighborhood, who's going to talk about it? Nobody wants to talk. Well, I didn't call the police because nobody wants to be somebody's coming after you. So nobody wants to talk about that part of it. But they'll talk about anything else. Now, with the advantages of the computer, Backpage. You remember back in the day it was Craigslist. It's still out there.
Right.
These things are still out there. Nothing changes. They may die down for a little bit, but there's millions of dollars to be made with these kids. And they start them out at 13, 14, 15 years old. And here again, go back to now society has to deal with what's left over. After she's tried to commit suicide or she's into drugs, she becomes an addict. Society then has to deal with that.
That's after the fact.
That's after the fact. But then it's like an old shoe. You're trying to rehabilitate an old shoe to make it fit well, but it doesn't fit the society. How much is it going to cost? How much is it going to take
to fix a broken person, so to speak?
And the video speaks of the John. In a few years ago, they used to advertise whoever got arrested for prostitution. They'd do a sting here in Austin and put all the Johns on in the newspaper.
For real?
For real. Now, why isn't that happening?
There's a decision's been made for that not to happen.
Why not?
If it used to happen,
why
and it's
not?
no longer happening, it's because the decision was made. This is happening anymore.
Somebody a little higher in the social scale got caught maybe, and it's not going to happen anymore, is it?
Somebody high on the food chain, huh?
Well, you know how that happens. A few years ago, maybe 10 years ago, you used to be able to get all kinds of addresses and phone numbers for cell phones.
Right.
But then there was a congressman's daughter who got harassed by somebody, her old boyfriend, found her name, and they changed the law. We don't want that to happen to us, just them. You see? When we're looking for something, we know where to go, but we're not going to talk about it. Now, scandals, sure, there's going to be people that are caught up in some of these stings. That
wish they hadn't been.
Right. I mean, it's going to be out on TV, and here your name's going to be in the paper, or it's going to be on a website somewhere. People need to be embarrassed. That's how you're going to stop it. Okay? Somebody needs to bring it out there. If that's what your bag is, and you get caught, you pay the price, right? You and I get caught for speeding. Do we want the neighbors to know we got a ticket for speeding? Of course not. Get caught up for drunk driving. It's kind of a personal thing, right? It's like, okay, got arrested for that stuff. We don't talk about that. Same thing with sex slaves. We don't talk about that. We'll go to Las Vegas, where it's legal. It's not legal in Las Vegas. It's not legal in Clark County.
That's Nevada, right?
That's exactly. Las Vegas, Nevada. It's not legal in Clark County.
But I understand it goes on there all the time.
It goes on in the outskirts of the Bunny Ranch. But it's not in Clark County. But, they do have women strolling up and down the walk. And you have advertising, and, that's more open than it is here.
What is going on here?
Oh, yes. Definitely going on here. But people need to just look.
And what I heard about Barton Creek, there's some substance to that?
It's what do they call it? It's more of the underworld kind of thing. Let's look at these strip clubs. Who profits from the strip clubs? Where does the money go?
I don't know.
Do they make they're entertainers? Is what they are.
Okay.
They're exotic entertainers. They're not strippers.
They're dancers.
No, not even a dance. They're entertainers. Okay. I've had a case where I had to go find one as a witness, but they wouldn't let me go in there because she's on contract. She's not an employee. She's on contract. And they won't let you go in there because she's busy. So what goes on in a club? Does sex go on in a club? Drugs go on in a club? Alcohol? What else do you need? A man. Men go into the clubs, right? So we got all the ingredients we have for what? For the underworld, right? So you put in a young girl that looks to be, she's 17, but she looks like she's 20. Who's going to ask her? How old are you? Nobody. So where do we put these girls? You put them in out of place bars, out of place clubs, out of sight, out of mind. Nobody's going to ask.
Is this the kind of issue that is, I guess this is basically a question, is this the kind of issue that politicians should even be bothered with? Seeing as a remedy would seem to be very difficult to design, that would be effective anyway.
Well, just like gun laws. How many laws do we need to address that? How many laws do we need to address a person that's got this mindset that he's going to go do something bad to somebody?
Do something crazy?
Yeah, how many laws do we need that? How many laws can prevent that? Another 100, 200? Do we need to ban everything? No, of course not. How many laws would it take to prevent this from happening? Here again, it's the inflow of people coming in. We need to put a gate.
And that's why I'm thinking perhaps good immigration policy could have a positive effect in terms of reducing this kind of thing, perhaps.
It would be a way of reducing it, yes. I would agree with that. I would agree with the fact that if you know that there's a bunch of children coming, who's going to receive them on the other side? What are they going to do? They're 13, 14, 15-year-old males and females. What are they going to do? Who are they going to live with? Is there an orphanage somewhere that's going to take care of them?
That's almost like built-in asking for trouble.
There you go.
It seems.
Well, if you come from poverty and you come into this country here where you see good stuff and you've got a trade already, so somebody's got to control you, right?
So it's all about control and money.
It's all about the money, my friend.
The money.
That's all it is.
It's the green.
That's it. We can buy power with money, and money's power. Is it true?
That's a fact.
Would you agree?
That's a fact.
We don't have any money. What do we have? Poverty. We can control people. We can tell you where you can live, what kind of car you can drive, what kind of job you can have. But if you fall from a family that's well-to-do from the get-go, you can get a nice. Which university would you like to go to?
You can get a decent education and have an opportunity aside from the dark side, let's say.
If you go to the dark side.
But when you come to this country with nothing but what's on your back, it's almost. I mean, the dark side can look pretty damn good.
Well, you're going to make money.
It may not be. It may be your only option.
Well, let's think about this, Mike. During the European inflow into the United States, they came through New York. They registered, didn't they?
Yep.
They came with what? Bags of money?
Oh.
No. They came with whatever was on their back and whatever they could hold in their hands. And then many people built businesses. People are driven to become better than where they came from. Okay? That's just nature. Unless you're something wrong with you.
That's the purpose of just movement anyway, migration anyway.
That's right. But why do we need to hand out billions and billions of dollars to other countries that are going to allow their people just to flow into this country and live here for free?
It's not very it's not a very sound economic approach.
Well, let's look at it this way. How many dishwashers do you need in a restaurant?
Not too many.
Not
now,
too
since
many.
Since you have dishwasher machines now,
Right.
especially.
Now, how many burger flippers do we need at McDonald's? It's getting down to the point where you can talk to a machine, and your order's already done.
Yeah.
Right. So we don't need that many people anymore to clean the tables. Well, one or two. So what are the other people going to do? Well, number one, just like I told you before, they're going to open up a little shop, and there'll be the drop-off point for drugs, the distribution center for the United States. Because why? 35 goes all the way to Mexico, to the border, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And it goes north almost to Chicago, doesn't it? Goes all the way to St. Louis. It's all the way up north.
That's a real artery.
Yes, main artery.
I never thought about that till just now.
Yeah. So here you go to El Paso, you go to Houston, you go to Dallas, Fort Worth, and straight up.
Yeah.
Tulsa, you go Oklahoma City,
Yeah.
and up.
Up to
St. Louis,
Oklahoma,
Missouri, yeah,
Hit 70.
yeah, and then into Indianapolis and into Chicago. So it's a man-made route, easy to follow, and it doesn't take a genius to figure it out.
Right. I think I might have one more clip to look at.
Okay.
Across Mexico, young girls dream of escaping their small towns for the big cities. Claudia, not her real name, was like that. When she was 15, she met a charming man at a party.
Entonces esta persona me hablaba mucho de Estados Unidos, que viniéramos acá a trabajar en factoría, donde hacen ropa.
Claudia was smuggled into the United States and taken to New York. Then she realized her boyfriend was part of a prostitution ring. He forced her into prostitution, beating her, burning her skin with lit cigarettes, and telling her he would have her parents in Mexico killed if she tried to resist or escape. This is the first time she's spoken about her experience.
Y para mí fue algo bien traumático el primer día que yo empecé a trabajar, porque fue algo muy duro, que tienes que trabajar con 20 hombres en un rato. Rápido.
Many people associate prostitution with women walking the streets in shady areas and being picked up by Johns. But Claudia says the prostitution ring she was forced to work for had a long list of clients who knew the price they had to pay, where to go, and who to call. It's a well-organized and lucrative underground industry. Luis C. de Baca monitors human trafficking at the U.S. State Department. He says there are no reliable figures on the scale of the problem, but forced prostitution from Mexico and Central America is a big part of it.
They know that their victims are not going to go to law enforcement. They know that their victims are afraid. In fact, sometimes one of their threats is to turn people over to the Immigration Service.
Claudia was 15 when she was forced to become a prostitute, but there are younger victims, as C. de Baca found out when he worked as a prosecutor.
I ended up seeing cases with girls as young as 13 and women in their 40s and everything in between.
10 years ago, Congress passed a law that allows victims of human trafficking to stay in the country if they testify in court against perpetrators of the crime.
And it allows these individuals who are victims of trafficking and go through the proper, procedures to be able to show that with evidence and so forth, to actually apply for what's called a T non-immigrant visa, which, if and when approved, allows them to be here in the United States lawfully and documented.
Claudia has now moved to a different city in the U.S., where she tries to live a normal life. But she's still afraid of retribution and wants to remain anonymous. Several cases have been successfully prosecuted in states like New York and Georgia against prostitution rings that operate in the same way. They lure women in Mexico with promises of a good job, only to be forced into sexual slavery once here. Rafael Romo, CNN, Atlanta.
Joe, what just occurs to me as I'm sitting here now, because I never really studied this issue, but it seems to me, I'm going to a state convention in June.
Okay.
It seems to me that there should be something every political party's platform to at least try to begin to address the issue. I know it may be impossible. You can't stop anything 100%, but to me, if there's expressed a will to try to do something about it, it would be the first step. You have to have the will first. Have a willingness to try to do something about it.
You got to remember that everything's in cash.
Yeah.
Okay, it's hard to track cash. So if we put $1 million on this table, where could we hide this thing? Nowhere. It'd be a big bulk, wouldn't it?
Right.
We can't put it in the bank, could we?
Nope.
So what are we going to do with it? They need to hit them in the pocketbook. Okay, these people, these girls, these victims, they buy clothes, there's food. Somebody has to be made aware of where this money's being spent, cash money. You see, but a lot of them use social services when they come to this country. You know, they may have 1 or 2 children, maybe a child, but they're still a prostitute, and they have to take care of the kid. So they sign up for these social services here in this country. People say, well, you know, you come into this country illegally, you know, they don't get any social services, and that's not true. That is not true. Right. I see it. I've seen them in public housing. I've seen them in line at the store. I've seen them in clinics and stuff. So I know it happens. So you've got to hit them in the pocketbook. The United States Treasurer, the Internal Revenue Service should be going after every one of these guys. Because once you take their money, they got nothing.
Money's the driver.
That's it.
It's the driver. It's all about the money.
That's it.
Joe, I just got a couple of minutes here. I'll wind up in 3 more minutes. I want to thank you for coming down and being on the show with me, and with educating and informing me and hopefully the audience. Hopefully they weren't as ignorant as I am on the issue. But I'm always interested and open to learning, because to me that's what life is. Life is learning and living, which you are doing. By the way, we're not going to talk about that.
We won't talk about that. But think about this, old Mike, because if it doesn't happen in your backyard, are you concerned about it?
Them is not in my backyard.
That's it. Not in my backyard. Somewhere else.
And out of sight, out of mind.
Barton Creek Mall in the parking lot. Who's going to know? They're shopping. So, would you be concerned? See a group of girls going down the. What are you going to ask them? Where are you going?
Right.
What are you going to tell the police? Where's the act of criminality that occurred that causes them to come in?
There's nothing really to bring to your attention to arouse suspicion reasonably.
No. And just like the man said, they've got contacts. They've already got things lined up for them. So we don't have to go to Barton Creek Mall. We'll take you from the house right to the party.
Okay. I understand. I got you. But Joe, I want to thank you for being on the show. I would say I wish you success in your private detective business, but I know you already have it. And I'll tell the audience, I told him before this show started that he's living like a fat rat in a cheese factory, no cats around. But thanks for coming on the show, Joe.
Thank you very much for the invite.
Good seeing you, brother.
It's always a pleasure, Mike. It's always a pleasure.